Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Optimistic Future podcast. Today, I am joined by Brianna Hagell. Brianna is a butcher in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, which, for folks who are not familiar, Dartmouth is the sister city to Halifax, Nova Scotia, here in beautiful Canada. And I'm looking forward to chatting with Brianna because she just seems like a really interesting person. I've seen some newspaper articles or, well, whatever people online news articles. I don't know if newspapers still exist, but I've seen articles where she's been interviewed, and she just seems to have a very enthusiastic view on the importance of buying local, supporting local, and just again the mandate or not mandate, the goal of the Optimistic Future podcast is to just leave us feeling empowered that we can do good things in this world to make a significant difference, to help with environmental, social, economic issues and other things. And I think one of the things that we can, or many of us can do at least, is try to support local as much as we can. I'm a case in point. I have a not-for-profit website that I set up and kind of oversee called Made Local Group. There's a Canadian version, madelocalgroup.ca, and American version, a US version, madelocalgroup.com. And those websites exclusively feature companies that actually manufacture goods in Canada and the US, respectively. And the reason that I've put so much time and effort into starting that website and overseeing it is because I think it's really, really important and really helpful for our society at large, and I think the world at large, to try to support local as much as we can. When we're supporting local, the goods don't have to travel as far to get to the final consumer. It helps to support the middle class. It helps to build small businesses. Quite frankly, large corporations already have more than enough money. I'd much rather support folks who are running, small businesses, support my neighbors. They're hiring, local people, making the job market better. And so I think as much as possible, supporting local is really important. So if you haven't already checked out those websites, please do consider checking them. The little mnemonic I have in my head is, okay, I need to buy something. Can I buy it where it's actually made local? And if so, then I will check one of those respective websites, or look it up online. And if I find it somewhere else, like, oh great, or if I find a listing that we don't have on our website, then we add it to our website. So on that note, if there are any uh, companies that manufacture goods in Canada or the US that are not on our sites, if you don't mind popping us off an email, there's a contact form on the website. Please let us know, because one of my employees, is looking for new listings all the time. But it's just really helpful if someone can just point us in the direction of a listing that you already know about. Circling back to my guest today, looking forward to chatting with Brianna, hearing what she has to say about locally made products. Like to hear more about her business, and yeah, quite frankly, to my understanding, it's quite rare for there to be independent butchers nowadays. So I'm just kind of curious for her to talk to her about that aspect of things as well. So I will, yeah, just hit pause the recording, and I'll be joined with Brianna in just a few moments. All right, so I'm now joined by Brianna Hagel. And Brianna, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So Brianna, would you mind just telling folks who are listening about your business and kind of how you got into it, and where your business is, and just kind of give us a little overview about what you do?
Sure. I own Vessel Meats. Vessel Meats is a dedicated whole animal butcher shop located in North Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, Canada. And basically, what we do is we source products, animals from small scale farms in Nova Scotia. We bring them into the shop, we break it down, sell it to people. Um, it's kind of like, oh, like that's, generally what butcher shops do. The way that I've set up the butcher shop is like to try to really like showcase what comes from what we get from animals. The aim of our business is to sell out every week. We try to capitalize everything as much as possible. We try to showcase the farms that our products come from, and really spark conversations around what is available locally, and how our food system has gotten to the point where people don't know where their meat comes from. So we're trying to kind of counter counter that.
Um, and that's really great because goodness knows that farmers need as much sort of showcasing and support that they can get,
Yeah.
especially the small scale farmers. Um, and I guess just maybe I don't know if this isn't like a bamboozling or tricky question out of the gate, but I mean just the whenever I talk to folks and say like, oh, like, when it comes to buying your meat, where do you buy your meat? Well, I buy it from the grocery store. Well, what do you think about supporting, a small farm, buying it from a local butcher, the whole nine yards, trying to buy it from like ethically raised, happy animals. And they're like, well, like they're like, yeah, I want to do that. Like that sounds great. That makes all the sense in the world to me. But just like the biggest complaint I get or objection to that is like, well, it's just kind of the price point side of things. So I'm just wondering if somebody said like, well, Sobeys has, hamburger on for like, 5 cents a pound. It's obviously a gross exaggeration, but
Yeah.
like, what's the, like, why should I pay more to like, purchase meat from like a local farm, from a, local butcher? Like, what's the benefit, to it? And I mean, I know why I do it, very happily, and I never buy from, factory farmed animals, but I'm just wondering, what your response would be to folks who might have that, argument.
So I find when people come into our shop, they come in with a whole bunch of different value systems. Like some people value the ethics, some people value the quality, some people are just value the diversity in cuts. So there are a lot of reasons, and I think that um, the price point is definitely when people come into our shop, they see things like we have things that are $10 a pound, $9 a pound, $8 a pound, and $50 a pound. Like we have all of the ranges. And so I always try to remind people that it's like you don't have to buy the most expensive thing. I actually think that the thing that you see the most difference in is our ground beef. And people are like, "Oh, ground beef." But like one of my employees has been with us for a long time, like, says it best. He's like, "I used to think I didn't like ground beef until I started buying this ground beef because, um, one of the biggest reasons I think, like, if the ethics and the quality or the diversity of cuts hasn't, swaying you is a lot of people get caught up with, like, grocery store meat is really old before you get it. Like, and like ground meat is like it has that weird smell for a reason. It has that weird taste for a reason. And when you buy some of the like ground beef or sausages or the stew meat, for example, which are like relatively cheaper things, that's where you're going to notice the biggest difference. And there are, like there are other places that you can, like I know like small shops like out in the country that they do like ground beef sales and stuff like that. So I think that people go in and they just like get like sticker shock from like the most expensive thing. And it's like, I don't buy the most expensive thing. The staff doesn't buy the most expensive thing. Like you don't need to get the most expensive thing. And another thing is people always think that we're judging people. Like you go to New York, there's delis everywhere. You go in and something's this much a pound and people are accustomed to saying, "Oh, like I just want $5 worth." And people come in, it's like they think they like their internal dialogue is like, "Oh my God, I can't afford this or I don't know what this is and I'm afraid to ask questions." It's like we're all the same. Like we're all not buying prime rib every night. But I think that like those kinds of things like people get really intimidated by. And so I think that like those, are kind of like when it comes to the price, those like when we grind meat for people, like you walk in, you order medium ground beef, someone goes in the back, they grind it, they bring it out for you. When you're getting one of like those tubes have been ground like a week or plus earlier. They've been radiated to kill off the germs. Like it's a completely different uh process. And I think like, some of those things are where you're going to notice the best quality difference. And I think that um basically like the way the commercial system works is it takes like 3 months for that meat to get from the abattoir to the grocery store styrofoam tray. And when people start thinking about that, like that's why your meat goes off so quickly. That's why it goes bad so fast when you get it open and you're like, "Oh, I had that home and it was like bad in 2 days." It's like that's why. And so I think, for the average person, those kinds of things, people really don't realize how long our commercial food system is. Like it's a long system. That's why your lettuce goes bad so quickly when you buy those big tubs of lettuce. Like those things, it's like that's been on a truck for a week or plus before it gets to you. So
Yeah, you can't beat the freshness and like just the
yeah.
taste. Like, yeah, like once you go, that route, it's hard to go back. And yeah, there's so many factors there. And then the ethics being part of it too, I think for a lot of us, myself included. Um, I guess just like kind of throwing out an awful apocalyptic situation here where it's like, suddenly there's no, small scale butchers like yourself, no small local farms. It's all just, mass produced farming. Grocery stores your only option. Heaven forbid. Like outside of the lack of choice for people, the reduced quality of those products, all the things that you just said. Um, would what would the potential societal impact be of that? Why should folks listening think, oh, I don't care, I don't mind old meat, like I'm not worried about that, I don't care about animal welfare, none of that stuff matters to me, but like I do care about society at large. So like what would be the benefit of supporting smaller scale farms and local independent butcher shops like yourself? Like what would be the downside if you guys suddenly didn't exist anymore? What would the negative impact be for society at large if you had to speculate?
Well, like the economic impact, like
Potentially.
like something I think is really important, and then like I don't know if we can go in a different like I got lots of thoughts on this, but something that I think that
Fire
people
away,
really
fire away.
overlook is that mass produced food are entry level jobs. So like everyone working at the beef factory, which actually there's one on strike right now in Ontario, and it's probably gonna like, these are all entry level jobs. They're often like newcomers or temporary foreign workers who are, kind of forced these entry level jobs. And when all of our food comes from factories, these are all entry level, no skill, no harness jobs. So people, your job is to go in and push that button or feed the bag on the tube, and it's entry level. There's no skills involved, and all of that equipment costs a ton and ton, a ton of money. So the banks own all the means of production, and the people running the means of production are very like entry level, easily replaceable jobs versus if you're building a trade, if you're building a skill set, then it's food service isn't the best, but it's still like better paying jobs. It's trades, it's keeping the means of production back into like the hands of like small scale people versus like all of our money literally just getting funneled into like a few big companies that are owned by banks. Because big companies don't own their equipment, they just pay debt, like payments to the banks on all this equipment. But in order to justify, having like a stew making machine that costs $500,000, you have to process a lot of meat through that machine. So I think like one of the things that really comes to mind is like all of our meat in Canada, I think there's 4 or 5 beef producing facilities. So like all of our money is just getting like really pigeonholed into uh the small group of people versus spreading the money like back into your community. And so I think, with like things that are going on with big grocery stores and, we're really talking about food security. Like I think that that's something that often gets overlooked is like the money component. Where's the money going? Where is, it's we're funneling it out of our province faster than we can make it. Like, and I think that that's, when you're supporting like my business, it's like I'm paying my employees like, I mean, a reasonable wage. It's we're not paying $26 an hour like they say, but it's certainly more than like a lot of my staff come from restaurants. It's more than they're getting paid in restaurants. They're learning skill sets that they can take other places and therefore like boost their career. Not only are they learning skill sets, like obviously like people think about the butchery component, but like our business is very like food safety forward. So like we're using a lot of HACCP processes, we're using a lot of above and beyond processes that we don't need to use, but like you can come in, you can learn these skills, and then you can get better paying jobs at like bigger companies. And so, we're trying to develop the staff. Like I need to develop the staff. Like we need more skilled people, more educated thought build people to produce better in our food system. And a lot of times with the big factory stuff, it's just you're pigeonholed. You got one job. Like your job's to cut chicken wings off, or one thing, and then it's unskilled labor. And so I think that that's something that is over, for the overall quality of our situation. I think that that's really important. When you're taking, like, I pay farmers directly, so it's like the money comes from me into the farm, the money comes from me to the slaughterhouse. Like it's a very short chain, versus when you're buying like over, like, packaged meat from the store. It's like there's so many steps of people between when it gets to the from the factory, or from the the feedlot, down to the consumer. And everyone's getting a little bit off the top, a little bit off the top. And most of that is happening outside of our province. So
Um, and thank you for that. And are there, do you know offhand, like, are there subsidies for meat producers? Like, I don't really know much about food subsidies, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that we're ultimately paying for through our tax dollars or whatnot, to subsidize these meats.
sometimes, like, the provincial government will issue grants. So, like, like, I got a grant last year for I got a grant last year for a smoker from the Nova Scotia provincial government. So I paid 40% and they paid 60%. So that was great. Um, I know that, like, a lot of those things come down, like, through, like, Department of Agriculture. So there are, like, some subsidies, like, usually for equipment and things like that. And then sometimes, like, if it's a bad growing year, like, farmers will get subsidies. As far as, like, food production, because we're kind of more in a production facility, like, our government specifically here in Nova Scotia is still very geared towards big companies, and big, like a lot of the legislation, a lot of the stuff that they do is really still geared towards, like, that next level of of growth, which is like, I could get really, like, deep into it, but it's kind of like counterintuitive because there's not that many people or big farms here, right? It's not like we're Alberta, like, sending beef all across the land. Like, we are very small. We're very small in population, and we're very small in, like, amount of farming that we have. And so it is kind of counterintuitive from where I'm sitting to just try to focus all your efforts into that. I really believe something that, like, comes across the shop, and this might be a little off topic, but this is something that comes across the shop a lot, is people will, like, be, like, reading their, like, cooking magazines, or they'll be reading stuff online, and they'll come in and be like, I want every single detail about, like, I want the beef to be grass fed, I want it to be hormone free, I want the feed to be grown organically on the land that the cow is grown on. Like, I want all these small details, and it's like nobody is doing it that perfectly. We need to support the people who are trying. There's so many times that I've had conversations with farmers where, I'll go to their farm, and, like, everything, like, they're doing their best, like, they're trying. They're not getting support from the government because they are so small scale. And I'll be like, "Oh, so, like, what about the feed?" Or, like, "What about, like, where are the animals in the winter?" And then they just get so, like, defeated, and they're like, "Oh, like, oh, we're trying, but this and that." And it's like, because they go to the farm markets and they shield these questions all day, where people want everything to be perfect, and then it's not. And then and then like, people are like, well, how can you justify this extra expense? And it's like, you have to support the people that are trying, because if you don't support, if you support them and they try, then they're going to try a little bit harder and try a little bit harder. And that's how we get our food system to a better place, where they do have opportunity and resources to do more things. But then also, it's like, if, yeah, like, you kind of have to pick your battles, because, like, nothing is perfect. Like, in our food system, like, it's never, like I always say, it's never like old McDonald's farm. Like, it's people have to, you know, give and take, because, yeah, like, the agriculture situation here does need a lot of support.
Yeah, my wife and I are good friends with Amy Hill and David Hill of
Mhm.
Snowy River Farms, and yeah, like, we've been out to we have own land right beside theirs, and we're out there, once in a while, and yeah, it's like they just work so hard, and like they're pretty darn close to perfection, I think, but like, yeah, there's just so many obstacles and loopholes, and yeah, when you actually, like, talk to the farmer, when you go to their operation and see what's going on, it's like there's just, yeah, so many hoops to jump through, a lot of challenges. Yeah, so it's yeah, I think, as you said, like supporting the folks who are trying, like so important, because if we don't support them, then they go under, and then nobody's trying anymore, then like you just don't have
Right.
any options anymore. And then you were at that dystopian place of like, nope, just grocery store or bust. Not to throw the grocery stores under the bus, they obviously serve a purpose, but
Yep.
yeah, if we can try to support yeah, the smaller shops and everything, I think it's farms, I think it's so important. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and I think you kind of alluded to this a little bit, and I think I saw this on your website, which is vesselmeats.com. I'll post your website and ask you about social media and stuff after we get to the end of our chat here. So post that in the show notes. But you feature organ meats as well.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, so we do like we have a limited quantity of organs. Um with one of our abattoirs that we work with, like we can get a few extra pieces because like each animal only has one set, obviously. And we like something about us is that we actually so we have the shop, this like a little side note. We have the shop that we operate 5 days a week and we do 3 farm markets. And with that, we do about 1 cow and a quarter to a half, like so one full cow and maybe a quarter of another cow or a half and another cow a week, and like 3 to 5 pigs. So we feed a lot of people with not that much product. Like that's actually like, all the farm markets, the sausages, all the stuff we do. Some people get like into the ethical dilemma of like, like the processing part. The amount of death that you see for the amount of people that we feed is substantially different than what you're going to see in like the commercial process because we are taking like every little part and trying to capitalize on it and get as much as we can out of it. And so this did circle back to what you were just saying. I forget what you were saying though.
I was just asking if you feature if you sell organ meats.
Right. So, whereas, there's like only 4 to 6 sets of organs a week. Um, we can purchase like a few extras from like other farms that we know. So like at the abattoir, like I kind of have like a few people that I can be like, oh, I'll get stuff from them and I'll get stuff from them. So we do have a limited amount of reach there, but we don't have tons. That's kind of like, and that's kind of the theme of our whole business is like we only get 2 flank steaks a week. We only get 4 flat irons a week. Like we only have a limited amount of this stuff. So if it's something that you really want, we encourage everyone to pre-order it. And it's like, if you pre-order it, you're going to get the best piece we have all week. If you walk in, you're going to get what we have right now. And, where we do like, especially with beef, like we seam out and suss out like a lot more smaller cuts. You're going to see a lot more diversity of cuts that you're going to see than other places. And that's how we make it all work is like, if you come in and we don't have a flank steak, we're going to be like, have you tried this? Have you tried that? And kind of give people like directions to try different things. If you like trying things, it's great. If you don't, then it's not going to work. Right. We need to have our customer base needs to be kind of like open-minded.
Mm. Um, kind of on this topic, but maybe I'm not sure if something you know about or not, but if anyone would know, you would probably know. I think sometimes about how like a lot of folks have an aversion to eating organs like livers and kidneys and hearts and things
Mm.
like that. And I'm just wondering if folks had less of an aversion to those things, because I assume that like when animals are being processed in more of like a commercial facility, all those organs is like, well, no, they're not that popular, so we're just gonna like send that for dog food or something like that. I
Mm.
don't know. I'm just wondering if there would be, I don't know, any like net societal benefit if folks were eating more organ meats, if that might, I don't know, if there'd be less, is there food waste
Like
or
less
organs like put
waste.
to waste? Like, I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I've always kind of wondered about that.
So a lot like the abattoir does a good job at finding places to use all the parts because that's part of like what the the slaughterman he like breaks the animal down and then he has the hide and he has all these other things and he tries to like find uses for them. So and like it's kind of like a cost and demand, like a supply and demand thing. Like if I don't know, Dr. Oz put something out on TV. I don't know if people still do that, but like you see it, it trickles
Uh-huh.
down into the shop like really quickly. Um, and so I definitely, people will put things out there and be like, oh, this is cheap. And then everyone wants it. And suddenly it's not cheap anymore. And then everyone's like, why is this so much more expensive? And that's why it's supply and demand for sure. With organs, a lot of the organs that you're allowed to keep are actually regulated, and they're going to be regulated depending on like which if you're provincially inspected or federally inspected. So you can't keep all the organs. And on the provincial level, I only deal with provincial level because there's no federal slaughterhouses for beef or pork in Nova Scotia. So, federal's kind of bigger level ability to export, and provincial's kind of like smaller scale. So that's what we deal with. So for organs, you're only allowed to keep in general the liver, the kidneys, the heart, and the tongue. But heart and tongue are technically muscles. So like when we're like if we're putting that into like pet food, sometimes the excess will go into pet food. Like we consider heart and tongue muscles, not like 'cause we have an equation where it's like a certain amount of each. And then it's like kidney and liver are in the organ section. So I think like heart is actually super tender. It doesn't even make sense because it's obviously the muscle that's used the most. But heart's very tender, and if people can get their brains around it, it's actually like super super nice. Like we'll put heart skewers out for barbecue time and stuff sometimes to try and get people like thinking about it. Organs are a little more tough because they have that like flavor that people sometimes don't like, that irony flavor. But we are getting more and more like what we get a lot of now is people asking us to grind organs like liver into beef. So like, to help them get more nutrients into their diet because there is that like, that nutrient component that, people um, you know, a lot of people now like yeah, like maybe they're not eating as much meat. It's usually the people that aren't eating enough who don't want to eat meat who need the meat components. So that's something that we do for people is like they'll have their own idea of what they're looking for, and we can do like 25%, excuse me, like liver organs and 75% beef. But they do a good job at kind of utilizing everything. But the more the demand goes up, the more the price goes up. So there is that
Mhm.
trade-off. Also, pork is like a lot of people have an aversion to pork, but pork organs, if you're trying to get more organs into your life, are way cheaper than beef. So
Mhm. I can definitely vouch for heart being so good. Like, I mean,
yeah.
I've eaten, yeah, kidneys and liver as well, but yeah, heart's just like it's basically just like the most succulent dark meat. If you can,
Yeah, and
get around the valves, it's
exactly.
so good. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
and people have this weird thing about organs, and it's like there's no difference between like a cheek and a leg and a kidney. It's all the same. Like it's all, come from the earth, going back into the earth. Like it all breaks down the same. I
mhm.
think that like I mean on a personal level, like I have like no reason to like have no science behind this, but on a personal level, I would think like where liver and kidneys are more the filtration system, like I would not want to eat like a commercially processed animal.
Yeah,
Like you want to have I would want to be going with the animals that are, have access to the outside and, have a like a cleaner diet. But like there's no science behind. I'm sure I don't know the science behind it, but it makes sense in, my brain. So
it makes sense to me too. And yeah, like I mean, putting on the thinking cap, I also would not be comfortable eating those organs. Yeah, you want to be coming from healthiest animals to be. Yeah,
yeah.
makes a lot of sense to me too. Um, just kind of diverging from the meat organ world for a minute, because I know you've we maybe touched on this already, or maybe it was in the preamble before we actually started the interview. But just I read a couple of articles where you were interviewed, and I know you have some opinions about the importance of supporting local businesses. If we've already talked about that a little bit within the meat world, farming world,
Mhm.
but would you be able to just talk a little bit about just the importance of buying local or just kind of your thoughts around that in general?
Yeah, so I think that so my personal journey, this is the short synopsis is when I started working in food, I really thought that I knew a lot about where our food comes from, and then I started working in food, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like so many things I thought were local weren't local, or maybe the pipeline has shrunk and it used to be local and it's not local anymore. I could go on a whole thing about like how like we centralized our food system in the 90s, and as an outlier province, I don't think that really was the best decision for our province. But People really don't realize how much of our food is not local here in this province. And I think, COVID, I think that the cost of fuel, there's a lot of reasons that you can look around and be like, maybe this situation isn't working out so good. And, so for me, I started Vessel Meats to try and talk to people and educate people on like how much bacon you get from a side of pork, like how much bacon actually comes from a pig. Not that much. There's bacon everywhere, like, and so like trying to get people to wrap their heads around that, because for me it was like a very eye-opening thing. And I really believe in this province. And like I would say, like, people think that Nova Scotia is an agriculture rich province, but we can drive from Halifax to New Brunswick and you like there's no farming, there's no animals, there might be some corn, maybe, like, it's like this province used to be an agriculture rich province, and it really, really isn't anymore. And I think that a lot of what we're seeing with the boycotts in the grocery stores and the exuberant prices by the big food guru, like, giants, I think what we're actually seeing is a food shortage. And I think that the government is really happy to let be like, oh, there's no food, blah blah, it's so expensive. It's like, actually, there's just no food. Like, we're bringing everything in from other countries. We're not supporting any agriculture at all. And I think that's really, like, I mean, you need food. Like, I just, to me, this is like it's A plus B equals C. We need food. We need healthy food. I think that, the healthy food situation is part of what's going on with our healthcare system. And people don't realize how important it is for their health. And, my food journey started over 20 years ago, and I was like moved out of my parents' house, and I was just like super unhealthy. And I didn't realize how unhealthy the food that I was putting into my body was. I was shopping in the center of the grocery store instead of the outside of the grocery store.
Hmm.
Um, and like, now that I'm getting older and like I'm almost 40 now, and I work very hard with my body, and I'm reverting back to like I need more protein, like I need more of this stuff in my diet to keep going. And I've had, so it's like this is like very applicable to a lot of people in different situations. Like, they don't have the same needs as me, but we all need to have healthy food, not snacks, not chips, not the center of the grocery store. Like, we need nutrients. And there's tons of research out there that, like, if you pick a tomato in Mexico and ship it up here, it doesn't have the same nutrients as the one that was picked here in our backyard. And I think, like, shopping at the farm market, like, we have a new guy at the shop, and he's just started like taking over one of the farm market teams. And he came back and he was like, I bought lettuce 2 weeks ago and it's still perfectly good. And it was just like, oh yes, because you never bought farm market food before. And when you start buying farm market food, you realize how old your food is before it gets to you. And so, for a lot of things, like, even that dollar component, um I've talked to a lot of people over time, and they'll say, well, it's not really cheaper to shop at the farm market. And the thing is, it's only cheaper to shop at the farm market if you like buy the ingredients and take it home and make the thing. So if you buy the ingredients and take it home and make a pizza, it's way cheaper. But if you go to the farm market, buy a bunch of vegetables, and then go to the grocery store and buy a frozen pizza, that's not that's not how it's cheaper. So it's hard for people because a lot of people unfortunately don't cook as much as this. There's so many outlying problems now. It's like you're working all the time, your kids, daycare, driving, sports, like all the things that stop people from cooking. But like the long term payoff to your body is, it's like something's got to give. So I think that's why local food is really important, because it's like that's where our nutrients come from. And something like I talk about all the time is like, we like Maslow's hierarchy. Like, it's a very basic need. And when we don't have any more food, like, it's like, I don't want to sound like super doomsday, but like a lot of the stuff that's going on with Loblaws and or like the big stores, it just very like there is a deeper issue here. And the issue is we're not producing enough food. And if we were producing enough food, we wouldn't be relying on three companies to bring it into us. So
So, on that note, like, is there anyone like on a grassroots level or otherwise, I don't know, advocating for more local food production? Or is this something that's talked about at, I don't know, amongst farming groups? I don't know. Is there some coalition for like we
Yeah,
need
like,
to fix this problem?
there's definitely some groups of people that are advocating, like a couple like the Farm Market Association of Nova Scotia actually the director there, his name's Justin, he does, like, a really great job at, like, he's always, like, going to the meetings and doing the summits and really, like, advocating for local farms. There's also a group named FarmWorks, and FarmWorks is like a lending company, but they like only invest in small scale food based businesses in Nova Scotia. And the director and the woman who started it, her name is Linda Best. And like she is amazing. Like, she's won the Governor General Award. She's done so much for food in Nova Scotia. People probably never even heard of her. But if you've eaten at a local restaurant, if you've eaten at a local business, a bakery, a cafe in this province, a farm market, like that woman has supported it. Like I would like she like FarmWorks has been around. Vessel started 10 years ago. FarmWorks been around at least 10 years before that. I wouldn't even bothered if I didn't know that there was that sort of support there, because banks just look at you and they're like, heck no, like we're not supporting this girl who wants to open a meat shop. That's crazy. But like I'd say like those are the two that really come to mind. And we do have some really good champions here. Like they are food champions, and you know, um, they definitely advocate a lot. I think we're seeing shifts in the younger generation, like even when it comes to like people working in government and people in like policy making. But I just think like that we're just in this weird time where we know a lot of things aren't working. People are seeing it. They don't know how to change it. The younger ones have ideas. I mean, I can speak from a business perspective. You got to try a million things and then most of them don't work. And then there's one thing that does work. And then that's what, so it's not going to be like a clear path to get there. But I think that, we're seeing like something, the way I describe it is like, farming in the 80s and the 90s used to be like Duke Nukem scorched earth. Like, we're going to mow everything down. We're going to nuke it with chemicals. We're going to make things grow that we want to grow. And now it's like, oh, maybe that didn't work so good. Like, now we've depleted a lot of our soils. There's a lot of poison out there. Like, ooh, maybe we're trying to get back to like, like keeping things more centralized, keeping things more small scale. And I think that, hopefully we see those sort of shifts when it comes to food production and regulation in our province and in our country.
Um, so we've talked about a lot of different things, and
Mhm.
I like to try to distill as we're kind of starting to wind things down here, as I know our time's coming to a close. I'm just wondering if you could give folks like simple, like folks listening, like give some advice in terms of like simple steps that they could take to try to help with this, because the average person listening isn't gonna go out and start picketing, their local
Hmm.
politician for like we need more local farm production here, or more food production here rather. But what are some simple things that the average person can do to make a difference in this regard?
So I think that something that the average person can do is like try to make one meal at a home at one meal at home a week. And you can make this meal like if you end up at a butcher shop, great, but you can go on like find cheaper recipes. People people spend so much time like focusing on the expensive stuff. And it's like you can come into like you can buy a bag of beans and make like a nutritious meal that will last your family like 3 or 4 meals. It doesn't, like less, yes, local is great, but once you find the things that works for your family, and then you're going to start, well, what if we do this or what if we do that? Like, I think that coming back to cooking is really important. And I think that once you do that, you're going to start, wanting to find better ingredients and things like that. Everyone always talks about going to the farm market. So, like, yes, like going to the farm market is ideal, but like a lot of people don't want to get up on Saturday mornings. But there are tons of little shops and farm market style businesses that are open in pretty much every community throughout the week. It does take a little bit of It does take a little bit of coordination, but the one thing I think if it takes more of is just self-control. So instead of thinking, what do I want to eat for supper? You think, what do I have to cook? And like a lot, like that's a little bit like we're so accustomed to just like, getting that dopamine check mark and having what I want for supper. And it's like, no, we got to think about like, what do we need to use up? That way, you're saving money. Like, so much food waste happens from people buying things and then it not getting eaten. And, like if you just use the things that you have up in your fridge, you're going to notice it big time in your wallets, especially now at the cost of groceries. But I think that those are kind of things because like you said, like not everyone's going to pick it. Although when the government calls and they make those phone calls and those automated things, you can say like, what are we doing about local food? Because, you don't have to go out and write a letter to the MLA, but they send those calls around. There's probably an election coming soon. It's important to mention because, yeah, when they know it's on people's minds, they pay attention.
This is true. That is the way of the world.
Yeah.
Um, well, Brianna, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Just before we wrap up here, I mentioned your website, vesselmeats.com, for folks that are interested. And then are there social media sites? Like I think you're on Instagram, but
Yeah,
where
like
can
we're on
folks?
Instagram and we're on Facebook and they're both just under Vessel Meats. I don't like TikTok. That's crazy. I don't know. I missed that. I'm too old for that. So,
Me too. Me too.
yeah, that's where we're at. And yeah, I think that, hopefully over the next little while, like, there'll be more conversations about the food stuff. And the scarcity that we are experiencing. So,
Yeah, yeah, I hope so too. And I think eventually we'll have to have those conversations if it really gets to a dire point. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on this. And yeah, I hope folks who are listening are inspired to, support more local farmers, smaller businesses like yourself. And I'm just really thankful that folks like yourself, put in the elbow grease to have these small businesses because without you, then we wouldn't have those options. And I think it's a really important option to have. So yeah, thanks again for your time, and I really appreciate it.
and thanks for getting the message out there. So we appreciate it as well.
My pleasure. And thanks to folks listening to this episode of the Optimistic Future podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and please stay tuned for the next one.